Hey y'all, welcome back. It is mommy time. Kids are napping. Monitor in the corner. We are going to talk about 3 for 3. Remember I told you March 29th must have been a good day, 2019, because I had 3 closings. Let's talk about the last one. If you've ever wondered what's really going on behind the scenes in a real estate transaction, you're in the right place. Whether it's the nail-biting negotiations, the crazy twists and turns throughout a transaction, or the moments that just make you want to pull your hair out, it's all going to be shared. I'm Brittney Frye, and I am the host of the Closing Chapters podcast. Here, we are going to talk about my career transaction by transaction since 2016. And we're also going to go through all of the golden nuggets that I've learned along the way that I would love to share with you. I want to shape your reality in real estate to a world that you can be confident, educated, and make really wonderful decisions for your financial future and build a real estate portfolio. No matter if you are a real estate investor, a first-time home buyer, or a luxury buyer, there's something to be had in this podcast. You're going to see it throughout the series that military is really my heart. That is my niche, and if you are a military buyer or seller, you will thrive listening to this podcast. So, grab a seat at the closing table and let's close some chapters. This one's kind of cool. This chickadee is still in her house and has done amazing things to this property. She bought and got an awesome deal. She bought an older house that was an all brick rancher on a good bit of acreage. It was like a good acre and a half. And she has expanded, she has updated a little bit at a time, inside and outside, and has done a fantastic job making it her personal oasis. How much did she get this property for? On March 29th, 2019, she closed on this property for $103,500. This house would be well over $200,000 now in just a short 6 years, which is amazing. And also the space she has added to it, the updates she has done to it, it is definitely going to help the appreciation there. I don't think she has any plans of going anywhere anytime soon, but it's really cool to see when a property comes to life. And this was a scenario where it was a mom that was starting over life as an adult. She had been renting for a while. She was working for an attorney's office, actually. So she got to help expedite all the processes for her property and let her closing company take care of it for her, which was really cool. But yeah, so when we went out looking, I was like, it's me and my son, and he's an adult, and he's just with me for now because he's trying to make sure mama's okay, and he's going to be ready to go out on his own soon, but I need to get settled somewhere. So it was a little duo team, which was amazing. And we looked around at some properties, and of course, wanting to be safe and wanting to have a little bit of space. Obviously, she didn't need a ton for her. What she really wanted was a dynamic house where there were separate spaces for her crafting, which is amazing. It's really cool if the needs that you have and that you want to feed into and have the capability of upholding in your property. So really she just needed a separate living space versus like her crafting space. So we found that. We found a beautiful brick rancher, and when you walked in the front door, it had a front formal living room, and it was completely closed off to the rest of it didn't have an open window. It wasn't set up like a dining room where it had access to the kitchen. It was a doorway at the front foyer, and that was the front living room. And then you kept going, and it opened up into the normal living room, family room, and then to the right behind that room was where the kitchen was at. So it was perfect for her. She was able to set up all of her crafting stuff in the front and then have all of the living space behind that, past the foyer. So she got this house, and it was okay. It had been like freshly painted, new carpet put in place, but it still had paneling, still had dark pine cabinets, old school bathrooms. So she has gradually taken this property and just added a little bit of love to it as she could. And since she has turned into a little lovebird and got married, and her husband is a landscaper, so he has set up the property really well. She had already started on it, taking a couple of trees out in the back and opening up some space, adding on to the exterior to make another carport / garage space. And she told me they've put in like a watering system and just done a lot more since I have been there. Every once in a blue moon, I get to stop by and she just shows me everything new that they've worked on, or I get really cool pictures and videos pretty much every year as soon as I send her a message saying happy house anniversary. So that's really cool, which happens to have been yesterday. So I owe her a message, don't I? And I certainly will get a new picture or video, I guarantee it, which is so cool. I love that when the clients want to bring me along for the ride. So we're going to keep this quick and easy. The point being that if you can see through the clouds a little bit, right, and see that you have the space that you need and recognize that you can personalize it over time, then you can get a pretty good deal, don't you think? Now, finding a house for $103,000 now would be virtually impossible. That's in livable condition. This house was absolutely in livable condition. She got a great buy. But who's to say maybe 175, 200? And in the grand scheme of pricing now and what we're used to, that's still a pretty good buy. So my point is that we've got to sometimes get past the cosmetic side of looking at houses. So often we get stuck with, oh, it's got paneling, oh, it's got old cabinets, oh, it's got a purple bedroom. Okay, and does it have the space that you need? Is it in a location that you desire? If the functionality is there and the location is there, make it your own. And you can do it a little bit at a time. I've told you guys about my clients in the past that did this with every tax season. Every time that they got a little bit of tax money back, they had a project slated for their house. And sure enough, when they sold 4 years later, they had over $100,000 in equity in their house. And it was the same deal. That was a cosmetic house, right? Great location, great setup of the house, and they got it at a really good price because it had been a rental for several years and it had gotten beaten up a little bit. Had green carpet in there still, needed to be painted, smelled like animals, whatever have you. But because they had planned appropriately, they purchased the house, and before they ever stepped foot, they were able to get the main traveled areas taken care of with paint and carpet, and then they were able to roll on in. And then each year, one project at a time, a kitchen, a bathroom, the laundry room, repainting the dining room, whatever the case was, a little bit at a time. So this is your friendly reminder that it doesn't have to be perfect the second you walk into the house. And there is no such thing as a perfect house. We know this. We've talked about this a lot. But even if you built a house from the ground up, you are going to get in it, you're going to live in it, and you're going to say, gosh, I wish we would have done X, or gosh, I wish I would have moved X, or this color just isn't what I thought it was going to be. I would have loved sometimes you just don't know until you're living in it and get to live with it for a little while. We did this with our first house. Very similar house where we had a big front room and it had a wall in between, and then there was another living room with a fireplace and the kitchen behind. We swore we were going to knock open those walls, make one big space. And then once we lived in it, we loved having that separation. We had dogs at the time. We didn't have children yet, but we were able to shut those pocket doors and have a front room or the back room that only the dogs could be in. And then they couldn't be jumping on the counters in the kitchen or we didn't have to worry about the fireplace. There was a door to the hallway to the bedrooms. We could keep them out of the bedrooms or keep them back in the bedroom space if we had company over. All of those type of things. Sometimes you forget that there's a lot of flexibility to be had when you can shut off spaces. And to each their own, everybody has a vibe that they want and what they're looking for, right? We like openness to an extent, but value our separate spaces. So I can totally see how this works for people. If I was in her shoes and I would have picked that house, that front room would 100% either be my office or the kids' playroom. And then we would have the living space behind, right? Probably my office, and then I would have had the living space behind. But there's so much value in just getting the home that serves you and then making it your own. And this also goes to speak about making sure that you're being reasonable about what you can afford. I think that's a lot of discontent. People are like, I just need to wait. I've got to save up money because I want X. So if I can't get X, then I'm just not going to buy anything at all. Okay. But we've talked about the beautiful stepping stone of equity, all right? As long as you're renting, you are paying 100% interest, okay? So if you were going to pay more than your mortgage payment for this house in rent, how does that make any sense, for one? And then two, if you were willing to rent something that's not what you desire, 100%, right? Then why wouldn't you buy something that you just don't absolutely desire 100% of the way and live in it for 3 to 5 years and see where it gets you? One, you might be surprised that you can deal just fine. And that once you put a little bit of love into it and make it your own, that you actually do enjoy your space and you do love it. And it's going to last you a little bit longer than what you intended. Worst case scenario is you get in and you say, yeah, this really isn't what I want for forever, right? But it's the same or less than what my rent was, and I'm building equity. And in 3 to 5 years, I'll make a decision to either rent or sell this property, take the equity if I sell it, and put it in to that $250,000 house that I want to get so bad, right? But sometimes we forget that dichotomy is truly there. Now, it's a process, right? You can't just live in a house for a year and expect that you're going to be able to sell it in a year and make a whole bunch of money and move forward. That's a rare occurrence, okay? But if you're planning to buy in 3 to 5 years because you want to save up some money and find the perfect house the first time, I would highly reconsider that situation and say, could you buy a townhome? Could you buy a smaller single family house right now in a location that you like that just isn't cosmetically pleasing for you? Does that exist? And can we get to the same or less than the current rent that you are paying? Because if that's the case, it's like really a no-brainer, my friends. No-brainer. Because you will build your equity. You can do whatever you want to that property while you're living in it. And then when you're ready to make the jump, when you've saved up some more money for a bigger down payment, or you've gotten a pay raise where you know that you can handle a higher payment, then let's sit down and talk about the numbers and see what it looks like if you were to sell or rent, okay? Because here's the other thing is if you buy a house and you know that it's less than the rent that you're paying, right, in 3 to 5 years, rental rates are going to bump a little bit at a time, right? So there's a very good reality that if you were set that you could go ahead and purchase and keep your property if it was rented, like you have enough money for the down payment for a new property, then there's a really good reality that you could be making a little bit of surplus on this current property if you have a renter in it and continue to build that equity and use that as a savings account for the future, okay? This is a great plan. For her, she bought it and hold it. She knew that she was going to keep it and make it her own, which was fantastic. But I can't tell you the number of people that use these type of properties where they can get in the door and do a little bit at a time and use it as a perfect stepping stone to propel themselves forward to where they'd like to be in the future. And I think about this all the time with vehicles too, right? If we got the vehicle of our dreams the first time we ever bought a vehicle, then what else will we have to look forward to? There's nothing better. There's nothing fancier. There's nothing nicer. There's nothing that's going to have more luxury or space or whatever the case may be. I bought it. I got it. It kind of takes away the allure of life and like what you're searching for and what you're thriving to aim for in the future, right? I feel the same way about houses. Often, I think about our first house, and sometimes we go, could we live in that house again? And the reality is we could, but we have upgraded since then, right? We're used to bigger closets. We're used to bigger bedrooms. But the living space in that house would be perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. The backyard would be great for our kids. But the neighborhood doesn't have sidewalks, and that's something that we desire, right? So it can be like hit or miss, but I can still go back and tell you why we love that house. We look at our house all the time and go, man, it was such a good house to us. Like it served its purpose and we really utilized it and we loved it and it loved us, right? And it's still rental. We still own it. And that's what we talk about all the time is, you know what? The worst case scenario when military life comes to an end is that we have a beautiful property waiting back in Sumter, South Carolina that we know we can afford, that we could go live in and figure out what our next steps are. That's the worst case scenario. To boot, we have that situation in 3 different locations now, okay? We have our property in South Carolina, we have one in Tennessee, and one in North Carolina. The 2 that are not in North Carolina, the Tennessee and the South Carolina, both of those, the payment is less than $1,500 a month. So we could do pretty well. We could be okay living off of military retirement in either one of those properties and making decisions and learning where to move from there. It's pretty cool. And that's just another like picture or thing to think about, especially if you're in the military world, is when you are able to buy, right? We know that pricing traditionally is not going down. Every time we move, we might be a more expensive spot, whatever the case may be. And that can be hard. But if we have built a portfolio, then when it's time for military life to come to an end, you have options, whether it's from full retirement or not, right? Especially, let's talk about if you don't traditionally retire from the military. Let's say your stint is up and you just decide you're not re-upping, you're not going to re-enlist. That can be scary, right? Because I've got to get a new job, I've got to start over, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. I can't get an apartment if I don't have a job, right? But I've got to get somewhere to get a job. What am I supposed to do? If you have some money in the bank and you know that you can live for a couple months and you bought a property 3, 4, 5 years ago that you still own, then you have that to go back to. As long as you can afford the payment, you already own it. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody. What a beautiful fail-safe, right? It's like a net to catch you. So as much as people say, I don't know why I would keep a property and rent it out, right? There are so many reasons, and you have to be comfortable. That's the end all be all. If you're not comfortable with that scenario, then maybe it's not for you. But if you are, there are so many different reasons why it could catch you if you were to fall. To have a place to land, have a place to go back to and start fresh and know that you can afford it. And that's such a cool piece about buying as you go along. And also, right, the longer you own it, the more equity you have built in it. So let's say you have no desire to go back there and you just need some cash to get you going. At that point, you can say, all right, I know I've held it for 5, 6, 7 years. I know I've got equity in it. I'm not going back there. I'm out of the military. I'm not moving anymore. It's time for me to cash out and figure out where I'm going to plant my roots. So then you sell it, and then you have a lump sum of cash as you're retiring to hold you over for a little while. Pretty cool, huh? So don't discount these little old lady houses, that's what I'm going to call it, because they can serve you well, okay? It was a solid, beautiful brick 70s home. And now it has become a beautiful oasis for somebody that has grown her family, lived and loved in it. And her payment, oh my gosh. She shared with me a couple years ago, she was able to refinance this and get a much lower rate, right? And the payment to begin with wasn't bad. Her mortgage payment is less than $500 a month. Now, does she pay more than that? I'm sure. She's going to pay this sucker off. She will do anything in her means to make sure that she is in a good situation. But can you imagine what you would do if your mortgage payment was only $500 a month? So just a reminder, we don't have to have the star and the sun and the moons right out the gate. Take those stepping stones, live on them, utilize them, and let them serve you. So kudos to you for buying a beautiful brick home, making it your own, and having a phenomenal payment that you will be able to carry regardless of whatever phase in life you are at. I'm proud of you. And I'm so glad that you took a chance to trust me and build your wealth within your property, and know that I am always here and always looking forward to seeing all of the new adventures, all of the new projects, and watching your home come alive.